Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Dr. Saida Jaffer, and I am moderating the session today on AI and how AI is changing a lot of business models. It is my pleasure to be joined by an incredibly esteemed panel of experts that I will very quickly introduce to everyone. We will start out with His Excellency Haytham Al-Ohali, who is the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Communications and IT in Saudi. We are also joined by Dr. Anas Al-Fares, who is the co-founder and CEO of Intelmatix, which is a leading deep AI company with a global presence in Riyadh, London, as well as Boston. We are joined by Dr. Sanjay Sarma, who is the president of the Asia School of Business, as well as a professor of mechanical engineering at MIT. Finally, we have, then next over there, we have Iskander Heikel, who is the AI governance researcher at NYU and Google. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Bari Adai, who is an advisory council member at Global Shaper DC Hub. With that, I'd like us to kick off our conversation. And AI is, it's an interesting topic, it's a timely topic, it's something that's top of mind for all of us. We've all seen articles that, on one hand, talk about how wonderful it is and how it means that, we'll all live a very happy, comfortable life. On the other hand, we've also seen a lot of headlines around how there's a lot of issues, a lot of challenges, a lot of dangers with it. So really, this is about helping us unpack that a little and understand a bit more of the responsible use of AI. And the one point I'll make before we open up is, how many of you here actually have your own Visa cards or cards in general, right? I assume everyone does. Congratulations, you've already been using AI for the last 30 years. It's not new. If used intelligently and if used properly, it has tremendous power that it can add to and that it can help and it can shape. And today, we hope to have some of those conversations as we talk about exactly what the power of AI is and how we can harness it. So perhaps we'll start with Your Excellency. Your Excellency, what role do you see for international collaboration and partnership in driving AI innovation and standardization?
Thanks. If we just look at it from the perspective that 15% of the global economy is digital economy, and the main driver of growth and innovation in that space is coming today from AI. It's no wonder why policymakers, regulators, academia, and the private sector are so focused on harnessing what AI can bring to the table. And as a result, we were seeing a lot of international cooperation when it comes to AI. And some of the issues that you kind of hinted to at the beginning cannot be solved unilaterally, but it needs a multilateral approach. Think of the issues related to either deepfake or misinformation. That will require a global effort, perhaps something around the best standards around generative AI labeling practices and best practices. That could be the best way to resolve such problems. And back when Saudi was hosting the G20 or leading the G20 effort, we were able to get a consensus around the AI principles, which today in the Brazilian presidency, we're seeing the implementation of that in terms of the AI guidelines. It's at the core of these principles is accountability, and which leads to the importance of data traceability as these data sets go from one algorithm to another to create these derivatives. In Saudi, we're a key believer in international cooperation when it comes to inclusivity, when it comes to AI safety. And last year, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced the International Center for AI Research and Ethics. And as you probably would infer, these topics are very complex and very hard to figure it out. And the center aims to kind of address some of these issues we're seeing in this space. Earlier this year in February, the center also announced its contribution to the inclusivity questions with the Generative AI for All initiative, which they launched with the partnership with the Digital Corporation Organization, DCO. And later this year, Saudi will be hosting the Internet Governance Forum, which hopes to address matters when it comes to data free flow and open internet, which are very important inputs when it comes to development of AI.
Thank you for that. Absolutely, and I think this is a theme we've heard multiple times in the last 2 days, that this is not something that one can solve alone. This is something that absolutely there is global thinking that needs to happen on this. Appreciate that. Dr. Anas, perhaps we go to you next. You're a trailblazer in AI. You are heading up one of the most innovative AI companies out there. But AI is not new, and AI is, while it is unique, there have been other instances, other precedents perhaps in the past where we have faced innovative technologies that have really shaken the face as we see it. So perhaps you could share some of those experiences with us and some of those learnings.
Absolutely. Definitely AI is not new as we look at it from a perspective of disruption. There is no doubt. In fact, we as humans have been fairly good at developing technologies with the objective of enhancing certain limitations or abilities in one way or another. If we look back at the first industrial revolution, with the steam engine, we had to augment and amplify our human capabilities of movement by now being able to move goods where our physical abilities were not able to do so. The same happened in the second industrial revolution. With electricity and lighting, we're now able to enhance and amplify our physical ability of sight. Even in a room like this where there are no windows, we're still able to see each other, and you guys are able to see us. The same happens again in the third industrial revolution. We see again us as humans with electronics and communication capabilities being able to amplify our even vocal capabilities, where now you can hear us talk, whether in this room or even those online right now, who are able to hear us even though they're not in the same place we're in. However, in all three industrial revolutions, they all shared the amplification of physical abilities, and that's fairly unique in what they were able to do. However, in this industrial revolution, and if we're looking in particular in AI and what it brings, it's the first time where we're able now to amplify our cognitive abilities, and that's fairly unique. And with that, there is more of this ability for us to do decision-making, more creative capabilities and beyond, which is amplified by the machine now. So not only our physical abilities, but even moving beyond that to something much more. And we expect, let's see what's going to happen in that fifth industrial revolution.
Indeed, we all wait and see. That's very interesting indeed. This is an amplification of our cognitive abilities.
Absolutely.
And if we take that, and Dr. Sanjay, if we then come to you and we think about that a bit, some of the fundamental business models are being upended. And a lot of new interesting business models are being created as a result of this, if I use your words, Dr. Anas, amplified cognitive abilities. So what are perhaps some of the interesting changes, new models that you're seeing that you would share with us?
So I'm going to add a little bit of provocation to this discussion. There are two types of business cases. One sort of business case is what I call outside in, which is great tech companies providing value from the outside of a company. And Intelmatics, where I spent a wonderful afternoon, is an example where they bring in value to an existing company to make decisions, for example. The more fundamental thing is inside-out business cases, where the company fundamentally reinvents itself, where the company builds itself entirely based on something like AI. Now, this has happened before. For example, Uber is an inside-out, mobile-first company. Hertz and taxi companies, they never could react to it. When the first company that is inside-out in insurance or in the airline industry, which is inside-out AI, appears, the large companies are going to really struggle. Because to go inside out is very difficult. You got to rethink customer service, ticketing, you need check-in, everything. And that's why a lot of large companies are frozen. Because it's very, very difficult to find the talent, the courage, the gumption to reinvent your business processes inside out. And that's the challenge. Now, I actually think that outside of the wonderful deep tech companies with people like Dr. Faris here, Al Faris here, very few companies will be able to really sort of go deep into AI outside of a few regions, few places in the world where you can get the talent. I mean, he has access to all the MIT talent, right? And all the best talent in this part of the world. I actually think the opportunity is for small and medium enterprises because they're small, they're agile. If they don't go AI, the next Uber will come and eat their lunch, just as Uber wiped out a bunch of taxi companies. And companies that use AI in small companies that really reinvent themselves, like a small travel agency, a small insurance company, to get better customer service, to sort of rethink the way they do business, they will be better protected from the behemoths when they come from outside Saudi Arabia. So from a defense perspective, it's better. And then, if they grow and become efficient, they can grow within the region and perhaps internationally, and they can play offense. So I worry a little bit that if we lose our focus on the SMEs that are not as glamorous, they will have their lunch eaten, and that defense will put us in a posture in this part of the world to play offense later. So train your travel agencies, train your insurance companies to use AI. And I think that's the approach I would take.
Thank you. That's very interesting, both on the outside in and the inside out. And I guess for a lot of us thinking here, perhaps that's one important takeaway, which is how do we make sure we balance both of those and make sure that it's happening in both ways, because it's frankly important on both sides as opposed to one versus the other. Thank you for that. If we then move on to Iskandar, would be interesting to hear about how you believe AI can be leveraged for operational efficiencies as well as overall cost reduction, right? There are many, many different attributes that one could get from AI. This is typically one of the ones that is top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, and it's a great pleasure to be here. So I think when it comes to thinking about target areas for operational efficiency and cost reduction, there are just some obvious candidates that we're all familiar with. So, if I use healthcare and biotech sectors as examples, you can think of there's predictive maintenance, there's improved resource allocation, there's also going to be automation of repetitive tasks like data entry or patient documentation, for instance, in the case of healthcare. And those are some obvious target areas that are just sort of part and parcel of how these businesses operate, and therefore they can benefit a lot from AI solutions. I also think that there are some novel or semi-novel target areas that we're going to see more attention being paid to. So, for instance, in the case of healthcare, there's this idea of like AI-powered patient engagement or administrative support. So the idea is, maybe we'll have AI chatbots that will help provide basic medical information to patients, for example, or to prospective patients, or they'll help with kind of note-taking for patient symptom description and stuff like that. And those are areas that obviously are underdeveloped or don't exist yet, and so I think you're going to see a lot more attention being paid to there. But there's also going to be an open question about how that will play out in the long run. And then I think biotech is another great example for showcasing how AI solutions can be integrated and can really help with operational efficiency and cost reduction. So I think we have some great examples in biotech already of kind of the leaps and bounds that AI can bring to the table. So when we think about research that's relevant for drug discovery, for example, you have the famous case of Google DeepMind's AlphaFold for sort of exploring proteins for drug discovery application. There are many other examples that we're finding sort of more recently than that. There's one company that's exploring using AI to explore synthetic proteins that have disease-fighting potential. So I think we're going to see a lot more examples of cases where you're going to see AI solutions being used rather innovatively to not only target kind of established areas for business operation, but you're also going to see the emergence of new areas that as yet don't exist.
Interesting, and I think that dovetails very nicely with what you were saying, Dr. Sanjay, right? Which is, there's the first type, which is the straight-up operational efficiencies, which you just take existing things and you make it better. And then there are things that wouldn't have been possible if AI didn't exist, such as DeepMind, absolutely. And I think it'll be interesting and exciting to see how more and more of these come to life as we go forward. Wonderful. But yeah, if we come over to you, there's been a lot of conversation about many things, but I'd love to bring you into the conversation now and talk a little bit about regulation and talk a little bit about how you believe the regulatory landscape needs to evolve a bit, given not only the changes that are happening, but also the pace at which a lot of these changes are happening in AI and related industries.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me begin by taking a quick poll at the audience and ask everyone, who here is an AI optimist? You believe in the upside of AI. Raise your hand if you are an AI optimist. All right. So who here is an AI pessimist? You're more concerned about the downside risks of AI. Okay, I see we have more optimists in the room than pessimists. So regulation is about striking that balance between enabling the upside of AI without stifling innovation, while still mitigating the downside risks and the harmful effects of AI. When it comes to AI regulation, it's still very new. We are seeing recently the EU AI Act, the US Executive Order on AI. These are still the starting points, and they will continue to evolve as we gain a deeper understanding of the risks related to AI. For businesses, what does that mean? Businesses need regulatory clarity to be able to invest in AI and use the efficiencies and all the benefits that we can gain from AI. However, they need to be concerned about the risks as well and be responsible in their use of AI. And so I would encourage businesses to take a proactive approach in which they're not only looking at compliance to meet the minimum requirements that are imposed by regulations and avoid fines or penalties or other remedies, but to be more proactive and actually conduct more rigorous risk assessments of the AI systems that they have put in place so that we can avoid and mitigate the downside of AI. And that can be done through a really ecosystem approach where all the key players can come together, both regulators, businesses, and stakeholders giving feedback, users, customers, engaging in that feedback loop to improve AI and make sure that we are developing safe AI for all.
That's very interesting. Thank you. You're right. Things are changing so fast, and we see this time and again in the innovation cycle, right? Innovation runs very, very fast. Regulation then catches up, and it does always catch up. And then there is a choice to be made. Do you take a partnership approach and you really and truly create that ecosystem view, or do you perhaps go one way or the other? Exactly. So it's a great call out. Thank you for that. Your Excellency, if we go back to you for a bit, we've talked a lot about AI, we've talked a lot about innovation, we've talked a lot about business. It would be interesting to hear from you around some of the interesting innovation that you see happening in business as a result of AI, and some specific AI-driven innovations that you think have significantly impacted business strategies.
So I think we're continuing to see it, and the more time we give businesses, the more impact we're going to see. But let me just take an analogy on the internet. The internet came about 30 plus years ago. It took us maybe 10 years for e-services and e-commerce to be fully adopted and to have an impact on the way we conduct our daily lives. It took us another 30 years from the internet for social and social networking to fundamentally change. I think we're going to see the same with AI, where we're going to see some changes at the beginning, but it is not the fundamental impact that all the hype is being about. So I'm just cautioning that for people not to be let down. This is going to take some time. I don't think it's going to take 30 years like the internet, but it is going to take some time. And early signs when it comes to chatbots and how companies are changing the way they interact with their customers is now very visible to many of us that interact using apps and the internet. However, on a more deeper technology evolution and change of strategy, think about autonomous cars or self-driving cars. AI in mobility is not new. We've used it for lane keeping. We've used it for collision protection. But now, when we have self-driving cars, which early numbers indicate they're about 16 times safer than normal cars, a new industry started to be evolved, which is robotaxis. Now, take that robotaxi and think about the impact on the taxi industry. But better yet, think of the impact of robotaxis on the disruptor. The rail-hailing apps that was just talked about are the disruptors of the taxi business, and it was just a few years ago. That's a fundamental change to their business model. The ride-hailing apps are very asset-light. They don't own the cars. And with the introduction of self-driving robotaxis, is it time for them to think about owning the taxis or the cars and fundamentally changing their business model? Think about logistics as well. Using robotics and the robotics industry has been using AI for probably since the inception of it. Using it in warehousing reduces the time from click to ship by around 80%, from 70 minutes down to less than 15 minutes. Think about how e-commerce is going to fundamentally change because of that. And think about the last mile delivery, where self-driving robotics are delivering packages. I was in China late last year and got a chance to look at firsthand at Meituan, a large e-commerce company that has now reduced the price of delivering last mile down to $2. And all the evolution that's going to come with last minute delivery and the whole logistics scene. Even on a government perspective, and I'll take a local example here from Saudi Arabia. We have the largest virtual hospital in the world. They do more than, I think now they're up to 300,000 consultations per year. But they also use AI and machine learning to go through CT scans of brain strokes and correctly not only annotate these scans, but also recommend the best prescription going forward. Think about the virtual hospital. In that capacity serves around 72 traditional hospitals, and they do about 4,000 CT scans per year. Think about the change in strategy for these traditional hospitals as who they're going to hire in the future with the availability of AI in the virtual hospital. Where should they focus their resources? So, to kind of summarize, already we're seeing the impact, but I think the long-term impact as AI diffuses into industries is yet to be seen.
I think the one thing that was immediately clear as you were talking about it, and it's great to see how much Saudi is doing already in that space, is the implications are profound. The impact on each and every business and business model is there. It's deep, and it's probably in ways we can't even understand and imagine today. But that's just the impact on the business side. I think there is a very, very real impact on the human side as well. And Dr. Anas, it would be good to understand from you how you think that relationship between us as humans and AI as a way to enhance our cognitive abilities and as a way to fundamentally change some of the business models. How do you think that relationship will change over time?
Sure, that's not an easy question, but let me just carry on what His Excellency just commented on, and then I'll get to the relationship between human and. Absolutely, I think we're just literally at the infancy stage of what the applications of AI are, and no doubt. In fact, reports by PwC, Accenture, Gartner all report that more than 80% of all applications of AI are really not there in businesses today. So there is a gap, and we know it. And if we look at some of the reasons of why that is the case, it comes down to the core of what AI provides today. And I'll give you an example just to put things in context. Say you're a retailer. Your current business intelligence capabilities, your CRM or your ERP, providing you top-notch information about how your retail stores are operating. And so it's telling you how much you've sold, what has happened. But it's telling you everything till that moment in time. So it's a rear view mirror of what has happened. It's telling you everything till that moment in time. Now, AI or an AI suite comes into play, and now it's providing you with lots of what's happening in the future. So it's now bringing in predictive capability. This is the expected demand of your sales, or what is expected to happen. And that's immensely powerful because now we're looking more at the future and what could it bring. However, going back to this same comment there of what this also brings is analysis paralysis. We have now an information overload. The systems just provided, the business intelligence just gave us a lot of what has happened. The AI is now telling us a lot of what could happen. And now we as humans are struggling to figure out what should we do about it. And that is a single major problem of the problems of AI, what it brings to the table today. Hence, some of those innovations that are now emerging very strongly is also bundling with that AI a lot of what's called decision intelligence, which is that last mile problem where we bring in for businesses a lot of that understanding of the business capabilities, really a lot of managerial science that is infused in all of this. And so going back to that same example, if our business intelligence was providing us a lot of what has happened, our AI is giving us a lot of the future of that retail and what we're selling, now the DI capability that we bundle with that starts to give us this very powerful capability of, now, how much should you order in inventory? So it's very particular to that last mile problem. It's a business decision that has to be done. That last piece is very critical. How should I schedule my staff? And hence another piece of information. And the list goes on. That is part and parcel of how we look at it. Now, also to that evolution that you mentioned, in literature we have a term called human out of the loop, human on the loop, and human in the loop, human on the loop, and human out of the loop. The human in the loop is the example we just heard on the taxi example, or in the taxi example, where if I'm calling a dispatch, I'll be dealing with a human throughout the discussion. I'll be telling them where I am, and throughout that journey is all happening through always a human in the loop in the discussion. Now, as we move from there to an example like the ride-hailing service, where now the human is completely out of the loop, you're dealing with the machine directly. So the AI now is figuring out where you're located. It's sending you the closest, literally, driver to you. It's figuring it out. Even pricing will be, you don't need to haggle on the price. It's already figuring it out for you. So all of that is managed throughout that journey. That human out of the loop, we expect to emerge and evolve more in many businesses. So today, a lot of our businesses are humans in the loop completely. And as time progresses, we expect more of our businesses and our relationship with the machine to be more of a human out of the loop. There will be certain, no doubt, elements that will be dependent on humans, and we still expect them to be. But as we progress, there is no doubt that we'll see businesses more evolving with more human out of the loop as opposed to human in the loop.
Very interesting. So more and more, we're going to see things being done for us without us even being actively in the driver's seat.
Absolutely.
Proverbially. Very interesting. We talked a lot about some of the emerging business models. We talked some about some of the efficiencies that AI can bring. One of the other areas where AI is typically hailed or typically expected to have significant impact is on customer experience, on the experience, on personalization, as well as on impacting how the users feel it and use it. And I know, Dr. Sanjay, this is an area that you're very deep in, and would love to share some thoughts on that.
You know, if you think about, so I live in Boston most of my time. Do I really need to own a car, or do I want transportation, right? I mean, that's the fundamental assumption that Uber is based on. I mean, do I need to buy a car, pay insurance, forget to pay insurance, and upset my wife, skid in the ice, chase the insurance company, look for parking? Do I like all that? Or do I just want an experience? Get me to my office. And that's what Uber did. Get me to my office. And that's enabled by this mobile-first approach where your phone has GPS, it's connected to the internet or the cloud. The driver's phone has GPS, it's connected to the cloud. Someone matches. And my experience of get me to the office is delivered without my owning a car. I think we are entering an experience economy, literally, right? Same thing, that's what Steve Jobs did with music. Do you want to buy a CD or, et cetera? Or do you want the song you want? Just that song, one song, at that time for 99 cents, playing in your ear when you want it to, perhaps as a part of a playlist. That's what he delivered. The product was the CD. He said, no product, forget that. I'll give you the experience. We are now heading towards an experience economy. I mean, when I go into a hotel, when I checked into the hotel a couple of days ago, I had to wait in line. I had to then pull out my passport, and then the person typed for, 3 minutes, stuff that they already had. And then they gave me a key. The key didn't work. I had to come back because, I kept it next to my phone, so it demagnetized. What we are right on the threshold of, Uber did it with just smartphones, is a fundamental shift where we go towards experiences, and AI becomes a pretty powerful weapon in that, right? The hotel, and if you had to redesign the hotel from bottom up, it would be very different. You don't need to dehumanize it. You can still have a person, they say hello, point out the amenities. It's not about automation without human beings. It's about deploying the humans where they can be human, not typing, while you're getting irritated. So I really believe that if you take any business, that's what I said earlier, airlines, hotels, insurance, if you really thought about how you would redesign it inside out, you will use digital. You will use IoT, GPS, whatever, right? You will use AI. And AI is such a powerful tool, not just deep neural networks, but generative AI, which can generate speech, interaction. I think we're on the threshold of a fundamental reinvention. The problem is the big companies have no idea where to start. That's why they need the entrepreneurs to come in from the outside in and tell them how to make decisions, do things better. But it'll be the little companies that can switch, and they will reinvent the experience, and we're right at the threshold. And we saw it happen. We've seen it happen before, several times. Airbnb, for example. Do you want a hotel room, or do you want a great place to sleep? Right? Airbnb said, I'll give you a place to sleep. Problem solved. And I think we're right on that threshold with AI.
Very interesting. Absolutely. So it will be very much about the customer experience.
Absolutely.
Very much, indeed. So there's clearly a role for the young innovators, the innovating companies. There's clearly a role for the larger organizations that exist that can perhaps learn from this or absorb some of that innovation and then take it forward. What about the SMEs? And I know it's been talked about a couple of times, but Iskandar, it would be good to hear from you on this. What can SMEs do? How can they also take advantage of everything that is happening and how AI is redefining the space?
Yeah, absolutely. So So I think one of the biggest challenges that SMEs seem to face here is a lack of a data and tech culture through which to recognize and actualize the real benefits of AI. And so it's going to be important for SMEs to invest in kind of skill development and worker training to develop sort of basic AI competencies. Perhaps not reinventing the wheel, but certainly kind of rethinking a lot about how professions interact with AI solutions. And so I think the good news here is that SMEs can actually outsource some of this by relying on digital services such as cloud computing based software as a service and perhaps more recently machine learning as a service, which can help facilitate scalability and at least in the case of SaaS, doesn't require much kind of technical competency as a prerequisite that would otherwise sort of constitute a barrier to accessing these sorts of solutions. But the thing about those kinds of solutions is that they also have challenges of their own, right? So you need a reliable internet connection of a certain speed. You need a certain kind of digital hardware infrastructure, and so I think the key here is that SMEs are going to have to remain kind of adaptable and targeted in the kinds of AI solutions that they're going to aim for. Yeah.
Okay. Very clear. So lots happening everywhere. It might even be at the point where we are no longer part of the decision making because it's happening with us out of the loop. It'll know us incredibly well because of all the data, of all of the information that's out there. And this has profound ethical implications too. This has profound overviews on what is and isn't and what can and cannot be. So, Bari'a, it would be good to hear from you on this, on how you see some of these ethical considerations shaping up.
Sure, absolutely. So on ethical considerations, what we hear from the global youth are there are three really important AI values to keep in mind when developing AI: transparency, privacy, and fairness. When we talk about transparency, we've seen, for example, the open source companies that have been really basically putting their codes out there in a collaborative way so that everyone can take a look and improve, provide, fix the errors that could come from the decisions of the AI. And this has been a welcome approach. But companies also invest in their AI systems. And that takes a lot of investment and R&D. And they also want to build intellectual property to protect those systems and gain a competitive edge, and then basically recoup and gain returns on their investments. So in that case, I think what we need is this profession of AI auditing. So having AI auditors that are independent, that can look at the processes and mechanisms that companies have in place for risk management, looking at the governance, looking at the oversight systems, is really important. It's a concept borrowed from accounting, public accountants. Just like we need public accountants that are independent, that verify that companies are in compliance with the tax and financial regulations, we can have AI auditors independently verify that companies are not only meeting the requirements of regulations, but have robust risk management processes in place to regulate or to mitigate against the downsides of AI. And that could be a quality assurance, basically stamp for companies and a building trust with consumers that use these AI systems. On the second point regarding privacy, we've already seen that in 2020, we had only 10% of the world's population that were covered by personal data protection regulations. And by the end of this year, it will be 75% of the world's population that is covered by personal data protection regulations. So we've seen in a span of 4 years, of only 4 years, an increase from 10 to 75%. And this is a recognition of the importance of privacy, of personal data. And that means that basically, it's a recognition that individuals are the owners of their data and should have some agency on how their data is being processed by AI systems. For companies, this means disclosure of how the data is being processed, for what specific and limited purpose it's being processed, whether it's transferred to third parties, sometimes sold without the knowledge of the consumers, And what are the protections in place to protect against breaches of data or this misuse of personal data belonging to individuals? So privacy considerations are also very important to make sure that we are using AI in a responsible manner. And the third point, basically on fairness. In terms of fairness, we need to make sure that these AI systems, the data that is used to train the AI systems, does not include implicit bias. Now, this is almost an impossible task. Most of the data sets have implicit bias because in the real world, we do have implicit bias as well. And we need to make sure that we don't perpetuate these inequities in society because of the implicit bias that AI systems use. So basically, there needs to be mechanisms to check how the machine is basically arriving at the decisions that it is arriving to, and whether there are some disadvantaged groups that are getting unfair treatment by the AI. This also links to the concept of explainability, to make sure that companies can explain how the algorithms or the AI systems arrive at the decisions that they're making, and whether they provide avenues for redress for disadvantaged groups in case there is unfair treatment by AI. So these are some of the key ethical considerations that we need to keep in mind in developing AI systems. And the last point on diversity of the AI professionals themselves, there are reports that indicate that only 22% of AI professionals are women. There's also the global south countries in particular that are still facing challenges with the digital divide, that is access to the internet. There's limited access to digital infrastructure and even to electricity, let alone looking at AI and harnessing the power of AI. So we need to make sure that we have adequate diversity and representation so that we can build inclusive and responsible AI systems.
Very helpful. And you're spot on. I mean, I'm just listening to you speak about fairness, and then I think about so many comments that have been made around healthcare, right? And how do we ensure that the data that's being used is indeed fair? It's actually relevant. It actually is for exactly the purpose, as opposed to something that's broader. So these are all very, very long questions. Can
I just add to that? I think that
Please.
It's not just, I mean, I love your comments because, I mean, let's say you do health screening based on American data. It doesn't work
Exactly.
here. That's a form of unfairness as well, right? That's why I think it needs to be a sovereign thing almost. I don't want to use the word sovereign, it has other meanings, but it has to be localized, right?
100%. Genetic markers that exist in other populations don't exist in this population, right? Where is that? Where do we have that information? And to make it even worse, I think a lot of places where that data exists probably already have good healthcare coverage. In a lot of other parts of the world where the data doesn't exist, we don't have a lot of the healthcare coverage. So it's almost a double whammy. You don't have the coverage, and you can't even use a lot of the models to be able to, because of data unfairness, let me say. But I think it's now time to perhaps take some questions from the audience. So if there are any questions from the audience, we can go there. There's a question right there. Maybe we'll just wait a moment until the mic makes its way to you.
Hi, everybody. So Mr. Faris here said that the loop, and don't you think that this is concerning and it might just take over us and take over, you know what I mean?
So I'm assuming you're referring to the concept of human in the loop versus human out of the loop.
Yes.
Okay. Not necessarily. In fact, and I'll comment on that in the following. We mentioned human in the loop is the human is also slowing things down in certain aspects where the machine can do a much better job than the human can. When we look at human on the loop, which is the in-between layer, that's where the machine is providing the recommendation, but the final action is taken by the human. And so that's where the human on the loop is. Last would be the human out of the loop, where the function or the problem we're trying to address is fairly well understood, and hence the machine can handle it fairly well. And an example we just heard is the Uber example. That is a type of a function that the human is completely out of the loop, and it could work fairly well in that. That said, let me just also step back. When we look at these types of problems, we tend to classify them on two categories: what we call operational decisions in a business versus strategic decisions in a business. Many operational decisions, we do expect the machine to take over, frankly. And many of them will be the type of the human either on or out of the loop. And so that's expected. On the flip side, strategic decisions will remain really in need of the human intervention. We are not there yet with the technology to either address many of these strategic decisions. So the human will still come in doing many of those. But yes, we expect many of those operational decisions to be handled by the machine sooner or later.
Okay. How do you think we can make it, less... Just give me a second, I'm sorry.
That's okay. While you get your thoughts together, I think, Iskandar, you had a comment as well.
Yeah, I'd like to just build off of that and build off of some of the themes that have been discussed here to kind of say something to your question. This idea of the AI taking over. So, not to get too philosophical, of course, but there is a real question here about the kind of world, the kind of society that AI might help usher in. Right, so Dr. Sarma talks about the idea of we're heading towards an experience economy, and I think that sort of one of the main factors that explains that is that we're heading towards an economy where you're going to see a lot of outsourcing of human agency, and I think the social media dilemma is a great case study for showcasing the kind of promises and perils of this, right? So, social media allowed us to, in some sense, automate and outsource the skills and sort of forms of agency that are involved in socializing with one another. And now, with the advent of generative AI, we're going to see a lot of cases of that writ large. But that's a very uncertain and evolving landscape. And like in the case of the social media dilemma, I think that we can expect waves and backlash when it comes to certain kinds of agency that we think it could be okay to outsource and to automate to AI, and then we may realize after the fact that actually that was maybe mistaken and we should pull back, right? And so I think in the business context, businesses should remain aware of the fact that it is an evolving landscape and we don't have all of the answers, and therefore we have to take a kind of adaptation first approach, right? Where we don't become too entrenched in the kinds of AI solutions that involve the outsourcing of agency, and we're willing to kind of adapt and modify as needed.
Actually, I just want to add to that. I'll give a very specific example. I think it's a great point, Alex. I think that losing autonomy and dignity can be deeply dehumanizing to human beings. And let me give you a very specific example of that. Let's imagine, especially as we live longer, but still have, for example, dyslexia, dementia, Alzheimer's, etc., an elder care facility that's run by AI. And it becomes operational. And you have an artificial intelligence system telling elderly people through maybe something in their, like a headphone, do this, do that. And it becomes dehumanizing and they lose agency. That's where we run into some real issues because this autonomy, human autonomy and dignity is gone. And I think we'll run into that very quickly. In fact, I suspect that's one of the first places we will see this show up. And I hope that society has the courage and the sense to put in place protections from this dehumanizing potential.
Though if I may just add one sort of follow-up point to it, of course I completely agree with you. But going back to that idea of the waves and the backlash, right? So there is a major concern about how AI solutions might be used for assisting with elder care. But on the other hand, some people are already discussing the idea that as you have sophisticated AI solutions that could enhance human agency, that might actually give us some reason to start to redefine what it means to be a human that has autonomy versus a human that has incapacitated autonomy. So, currently there are many elderly people who suffer from dementia, And we think that that's a kind of debilitating condition that compromises their autonomy. But if you had an AI solution that could sufficiently help them to regain some form of independence despite having that medical condition, you know, that's a way in which we can see autonomy being outsourced, autonomy being regained. Yeah, so again, it really is an uncertain and shifting landscape. But because of that, there's such room for creative possibilities here.
All
So
right.
if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is there's a lot of potential for both good and bad.
Yeah.
We just have to be ready and acknowledge that the fact that we're going to have to take a test and learn approach. And if things go wrong, and they might, we have to be ready to be able to react very, very quickly. Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions?
How do you think we could avoid, avoid the disadvantages of artificial intelligence? Like, for example, jobs that are gone from AI. People are making decisions that they're not making decisions from themselves. They're just asking AI all the time. I mean, it's with us literally all the time. So how do you think we can avoid, like, following AI and making it part of your life? Because I think it's becoming part of our life, literally. Like cars driving themselves, asking them questions, they're making your decisions, literally.
Your Excellency?
I don't think we're in a position to fully answer that because we don't fully understand the impact and the evolution of AI, how it's going to happen. Maybe 100, 200, 300 years down the road, maybe, I don't know. However, there are certain qualities and abilities that a human has that AI doesn't have. The ability to be strategic, my colleagues just mentioned, the ability to be compassionate, empathy. These are all qualities that all humans have, and it's not possessed by the machine, at least not yet. I'll give you a couple of scenarios. Think, we all saw the Hollywood writer strike, right? Because they were afraid AI is going to take over their jobs and movies are going to be created by AI. That's definitely a possibility. However, look at another possibility where, take your favorite movie, for example, where because the human elements are there, compassion, empathy, etc., it's a beautiful work of art. And then you use AI maybe to add 3 or 4 versions of that movie with a twist, with a different ending, with a slight different plot. I think to reach to that conclusion that AI is going to take our jobs or destroy value in our community and economy, I think we're a very, very long way from answering that. And the reason is that God created humans with supernatural or super abilities and emotions that the machine still lacks.
Thank you. I think I saw another question back there. So perhaps if we could hand the mic over back. Oh, there's that one, and then we'll move over to you.
Thank you so much for this intervention. Actually, I just want to add one thing. I'm an educational psychologist. So while working on the cognitive level, AI is helping us so much to improve, to make this life-changing, to make that disability into ability and see all kids are able to do things like others. But when it comes to psychological part, it's really important as a human part not to lose this gut feeling that will be really a life change for the kids, for the environment, and for his family, because working on in a systematic way that we can see many patients having the same criteria as, for example, ADHD. But under this, there is underdiagnosed abuse, bullying, giftedness, and any others situation. So it's really important to keep this humanitarian part and not to forget to maybe to add this part to our work.
Thank you. That was a lovely comment. I think there was one question there. That's probably the last question we will have time for, but our panelists will be around later, so for any other questions.
I'm sorry, I want to speak Arabic, okay? ما هو الدور الذكاء الاصطناعي في تطوير وصناعة الأطراف الآلية وصياغتها في التحول الاقتصادي السعودي? Thank you so much.
Okay, so
Can you?
I'll translate quickly. I think the question was, what are the capabilities that AI brings to bear in regards to artificial limbs, and how will that affect the Saudi economy and industry? I hope I translated it correctly. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. So His Excellency just threw that question on me. So I'm not an expert in the field, so I do apologize in that regard. But I'll start at least with a little bit of. Today, AI is contributing a great deal in bionics in general. The way where we start seeing the connections between the capabilities of AI as a field in its own right with that merging of biology is phenomenal, and we see it in so many aspects. Whether it is in enhancing, again, going back to my first comment when we mentioned that amplifying of our physical abilities in those three industrial revolutions, robotics, as they come in, will undoubtedly change a great deal of those capabilities. In fact, we had the comment where Hugh Herr, a faculty at MIT, who had his both limbs, both feet, he lost both feet due to a mountaineering exercise where he had frost and they had to be amputated. He uses bionic legs and tends to be also very proud of showing them off throughout. In that capacity, he also uses he also has the comment of what was it that you mentioned?
He says, "Why would you keep your real legs
if you
could have these?"
And the argument there is, and for those who haven't seen it, he has some amazing videos in that regard. So I think the short answer is, AI will undoubtedly bring a great deal of capabilities when it comes down to even bionics in a sense. We're very much in that infancy stage, but there is definitely an evolution there happening.
In fact, I'll go further and say that augmented reality, I think it's finally here. I never thought AI was really here until I started playing with GPT-2 about 2 years ago. And I believe that augmented reality and augmented human performance with something called, there are these bodysuits that make you can do super amazing things with them. It's like a superpower. Exoskeletons, for example. I think this is going to happen. It's basically you're wearing a robot, right? And I think we're on the verge. But you should check out the work of Professor Hugh Herr that Dr. Anas just mentioned, Herr. It's very inspiring.
Thank you for that. In the last minute, as we wrap up, perhaps you could share in 10, 15 seconds your thoughts, your one key takeaway for some of the companies, some of the people sitting here. What should we be thinking about when we think of AI? And how can we integrate it in future plans? Perhaps, Iskandar, we can start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an evolving risk landscape, and it's an evolving field of possibility. And so you have to take an adaptability first approach. And for AI governance especially, that matters, right? Dr. Sarma and I have already discussed this idea of a dynamic AI governance pipeline that you can constantly re-update. I think that's key.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Sanjay?
I think we are in a very strange moment, of time, where we will enter a period of great productivity, but not necessarily of job growth, perhaps a very significant loss of jobs. And I do believe that education, incentives, and also infrastructure need to be put in place to prepare society for this?
Thank you. Dr.
Absolutely.
Anas?
I mean, I'll keep it short. I do believe AI is definitely here to stay, and yes, it absolutely will change the job landscape, but not necessarily in a bad way that we might assume. And so I think we need to continue being optimistic of what it holds and the future that it holds.
Here to stay. Use it. Get familiar with it. Don't be afraid of it. Experiment with it. It has great potential.
Thank you.
We need all stakeholders to engage actively in a collaborative ecosystem so that we can build safe and inclusive AI for all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Join me in thanking the panel for their
Thank you very much.